Morning Glory and Evening Grace, America. As promised, this is the hour. This book dropped today, Fight. Fight is the inside the wildest battle for the White House. It's by Jon Allen of NBC News, Amie Parnes of The Hill. Jon and Amie have been guests before when they've written bestsellers. Fight is going to be a bestseller. Might occasion a few duels on the mall between a few people. But Jon and Amie, welcome. Jon, of course, let me begin with you if I can. Have you had any early reaction from the people that you profile in this book? Are they angry?
There are definitely some people who are angry and some people who are going to get angrier. But really, what this book is deep inside all of the campaigns, the Trump campaign, Biden campaign, what became the Harris campaign, the relationships within the Democratic Party that, that frayed, the cannibalization that happened within the Democratic Party after the Biden-Trump debate. As you know, we've talked to you about multiple books before. I really believe Amie and I are as good as any reporters at really getting to the truth of what happened.
I'm going to get into some details, but I'm going to start with the same question to you, Amie, who's on the phone. Anybody call you up yet to say, I'm never talking to you again and we're never having lunch and don't even come near my house?
It's getting there.
Yeah.
But, our job as reporters, Hugh, and that's what makes our books good, I think, is that we call balls and strikes on all sides. And that's the job of this book, is to tell people what really happened without any of the pretense, and that is what you'll get in this book.
Now, I want to go to a detail. It's a minor detail, but it proves to my audience, which is center-right to conservative, that you can trust this book. This is the kind of detail that validates for my audience that Jon and Amie have done their job. It's on page 213 to 221. It's the story of the ABC News debate hosted by David Muir and Lindsay Davis with President Trump and then Vice President Harris. And I'm quoting, quote, "What the F is this?" Close quote. Chris LaCivita, a retired Marine, bellowed at ABC News producer John Santucci when the campaign convoy caught up with him in a hallway outside the studio. Quote, "This is an F job." And the reply from Mr. Santucci, quote, "We are in the control room. We are in the ears," Santucci said, suggesting that the executives were pressing the moderators to dial it back. "We are trying." That's on page 218. This, to me, Jon Allen, tells me a great deal. You and I have done debate prep before. What's it tell you about what Santucci was saying to LaCivita?
Yeah, we've done debate prep literally together before,
Yep.
Hugh. And look, what it tells me is that that the ABC producer thought that the campaign was right to be angry, that the instant fact check was not the plan, and that the moderators were doing their own their own idea of what this should have been, that it wasn't part of the rules, and that, of course, the producer in that position is between the campaign that's angry about what's going on with these instant fact checks on the one side, and then the moderators on the other who work with that producer. It's a tough position to be in. Credit where it's due to the Tucker Carlson service, where they've done a big documentary, and so some of that is that we described is memorialized in video that we were able to review by subscribing, and we did our own reporting here, but there wasn't supposed to be that kind of one-sided fact checking, and the Trump campaign was rightly angry that was going on during the debate.
Amie, do you think the moderators went rogue, or do you think that ABC planned to sabotage Trump?
I think they did their job, but I think that there were a lot of people I heard from that night who felt the way that you just described, and I think that's why people see people in the news business as not being straight. But I do think that that was very much a view of some.
But do you think it was the moderators or was it ABC's plan? NBC, with whom I have worked, CNN, with whom I have worked on presidential debates, did not have a plan to go rogue. There was no opportunity. We knew what we were going to do, and Jon can confirm that. Amie, do you think the moderators went rogue or that ABC planned to torpedo Trump?
I don't think they planned to torpedo it, and it's hard to go inside and describe what really happened. But I think they did. I know because I heard from people that they were really, really upset about it.
Oh, well, they should have been. In fact, I think the debate ended up. It's interesting. If I can go a couple pages later, John, you write that J.D. Vance says to Trump over at the spin room, "I think you killed her," Vance tells Trump. Then you throw a dart like a stormtrooper under the influence of a Jedi mind trick. I disagree with that, John. Then you quote Rubio. "I think the people analyze it and the way real voters analyze it are very different." I think he's right, and that the people saw that and thought Trump got screwed. So I think J.D. Vance was actually right, John. Do you think it's right to call him a stormtrooper and a Jedi mind trick? I'm trying to save your
Well,
credibility with my audience here.
it was an opportunity for I think a clever line. I hope a clever line. Look, I think JD Vance was right that Trump got his point across, and I also think that Rubio was right that there were different interpretations, and in Rubio's view, the one that mattered was the one at home, right? Not what the Beltway insiders were going to take from the debate, not what necessarily the moderators would take from the debate, but what folks at home were going to see. And by the way, they don't. Folks at home don't want to see a debate that they think the referees are pushing down on one side. So I understand the umbrage you take at the description of the description of JD Vance and what he said. I just thought it was funny. That his boss basically comes out and he goes, "You killed her! You killed her!" Very cheerleading compared to Marco Rubio's slightly more nuanced version of it.
Well, everyone is a prisoner of their own experience. I watched it with a Hollywood producer who got up and said, "Trump's over." He insulted Taylor Swift, and they're killing the dog. They're eating the dogs. Amy, you guys went around and talked to everyone where they watched. I thought it was excellent reporting, by the way, on the first debate, the Trump-Biden debate. When did you come upon that scheme to just collect impressions at the time that it happened? Because it works really well.
I mean, we were hearing from people in real time that night, Hugh, and I think we started there because that's where the book starts, because that's where things really got interesting. I mean, Biden clearly bombed that night, and my phone was blowing up. Everyone's phone was blowing up. Nancy Pelosi, as we report in this book, she's sitting in her living room alone. It's almost like she knows that this is about to happen, and she's not with anyone. Jim Clyburn, also alone, having a drink by himself. People were feeling insecure about how things might go that night, and their phones are blowing up. And what we do is we do a 360, and we take you inside all the Democratic leaders in that moment, and you can watch the train wreck unfold from there.
I loved it. I loved it as a Republican, but I got to tell you, it was very good reporting. Now, John, I want to make a statement. I think the days from June 27th, which are the day of the debate, until July 21st, when Joe Biden drops out, are the most interesting 24 days in American modern political history. I think those are the most interesting, pressure-packed 24 days you can pick. Now, 9/11 is a national crisis, obviously, that requires a response. But in terms of just pure politics, does anything compare with those 24 days?
No, absolutely not. 24 days that shook the world. Amy and I weren't even planning to write a book about this campaign until that debate happened. And then the debate happened. The publisher reached out, said, "Would you guys be willing to write a book?" And we said, "This is the most fascinating time in American politics." And to just remind everybody, you go from that debate, we do all the deep reporting on what's going on in the Democratic Party as they start to tear each other apart, knives out, backstabbing going on, relationships fraying, longtime friends becoming enemies. And then, within that time period, you also have an assassination attempt, the first assassination attempt on Donald Trump, the first thing like that in, I'm trying to do my math here, but basically 45 years, since Reagan was shot, and of course he was not campaigning at that time. This horrible moment in American history where, a candidate for president, a nominee of a party, a former president, gets shot. That happens within that time frame. Donald Trump also chooses J.D. Vance as his vice presidential candidate in that time frame. So, and then Joe Biden steps aside in something that we have not seen in modern politics, which is someone who has already basically clinched their nomination, deciding that they're not going to continue to run. All of this unprecedented and just jam-packed into 24 days. And it's one of the reasons that I think this book reads so fast, it is so propulsive, because there's so much going on in such a short
Propulsive
period
is
of
a
time.
great word. I mean, it's a page turner, especially those 24 days. And Amy, at the end of it, I always keep at the back of a book notes of things, and I'm just holding it up so people have things I got to ask you about, and then I make my outline, etc. I think Nancy's new nickname, Nancy Pelosi, is Nancy the Knife. She absolutely filleted Joe Biden. She did it, didn't she? It was Nancy the Knife who put the blade in.
Oh yeah, but Nancy Pelosi's greatest secret, or maybe worst kept secret, is that she doesn't want fingerprints on this, and so she basically says now like she did nothing. But
there are fingerprints. I've got the autopsy in my hand. The book Fight is an autopsy of what happened, and she killed him. And they're going to be mad at each other forever. I don't think they're ever going to get together again. Do you?
We report that.
No.
He actually does not like her at all and will never speak to her again. And we report that in this book as well. But yeah, she knifed him and then kept turning the knife.
All right. So we don't know what the biggest headlines are out of Fight. I think one of the big headlines is going to be that Muir and Davis went rogue. But I want to point to two people, to the dog that didn't bark, John. The names Sullivan and Blinken are not in Fight. Now, I think I read the book pretty closely. There is no index. Am I correct that the names Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken are not in Fight?
I believe they are not in Fight, Hugh.
Now, the reason this alarms me, is that the country was without a president probably from the moment that Kevin McCarthy does his walk around, which I believe is in September of 2022. That you guys detail a very scary moment when the president is clearly non compos mentis. We don't have a president from July of 2022. We have a regency. And I think that regency is made up of Sullivan, Blinken, and Dr. Jill Biden. Amy, what do you think? Who ran the country during his episodes?
I mean, don't forget there's a crew of loyalists, including Ron Klain, the chief of staff, who was with him for most of the first term. Steve Ricchetti, Mike Donnellan, all of these people. These are the people that people are blaming right now for kind of keeping this a secret. But these are his closest aides. They've been around him for a long time, and a lot of people say they were essentially running the country at the time.
The thing that will stun people, I really do think they'll be stunned. The closest advisor to Joe Biden is Hunter Biden. On page 80, for example, Jon Allen, you point out Hunter Biden had pushed Anita Dunn, maybe the savviest and most experienced operative in this whole world. Some people are going to argue that JOD is, but it's really Anita Dunn. She's pushed out by Hunter Biden. Why in the world would anyone trust Hunter Biden? I mean, I'm glad he's in recovery. He's an addict. He's a bad guy. He's compromised the campaign. He's a felon. Why would they do that?
Just shows such terrible judgment on the part of the president. Who it's one thing to stick by your child when they're going through recovery, and I don't think anybody blames Joe Biden for giving love and support to his son, but to bring his son in as a political advisor, who has an axe to grind against some of the other political advisors, particularly Dunn and Bauer. Dunn and Bauer, her husband Bob Bauer, who was Joe Biden's personal lawyer, were advising the president during his presidency that he should stay away from Hunter Biden, that he should not leave any perception that he is fiddling in the Justice Department, that he is making arguments on behalf of his son's legal case. And Hunter Biden hated that because he watches Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is out there in public defending himself. And Hunter Biden wanted his father to do the same thing. And we saw Joe Biden caught betwixt and between there, right? There were times when he was quieter, times when he was louder. But Hunter really did not like that about Dunn and Bauer. And a lot of people in the Democratic Party are uncomfortable with Anita Dunn's revolving door policy, meaning she's revolved in and out of the White House into the private sector, made a lot of money. And I think ultimately Hunter Biden didn't trust, no longer trusted Anita Dunn to give his father the best advice. I think the First Lady was in the same place. And ultimately what you see is after that debate, Anita Dunn ends up being kind of the fall person, in part because she was one of the people, maybe the only person, internally, who originally said Biden shouldn't debate Trump, and then eventually she was outvoted.
She was right. She was right. Now I'm glad that they did, or the scam might have gone on, and we'd be stuck with Woodrow Wilson for another 4 years. Amy, I want to point out, Kevin McCarthy's a Republican, so people might dismiss his September 2022 concern that holy s the president is not with it. The guy literally lost his mind. But let's go over to the other side of the aisle. You've got Eric Swalwell at the White House picnic in June 2023 telling you that he has concerns that his mental acuity is gone. So it's
Yeah.
not just Kevin McCarthy, it's also Eric Swalwell. How many
Yeah.
people knew, do you think?
I mean, it's clear to me that everyone saw it. I mean, there are people who have these stories. Swalwell was, he ran against him in the primary in 2020. This is a rank and file member, but he's very, he has a big, large profile. He had to kind of cue the president at the time to remind him who he was. And I think that was startling to him and other people. And, we've heard other stories from people who went to him and they also had to remind him. We have stories in this book that have never been revealed about how he would start his day with a makeup crew.
Oh my gosh! It's so it's so troubling that this could be hidden. That's what.
And he missed some meetings because of that.
I think what people will take away from Fight is that a whole bunch of people betrayed their oath to the country by not revealing that the 25th Amendment needed to be invoked. And I was with Donald Trump on the day that the debate challenge was issued. It was May 15th, I believe. I was on the air with him, and he said, I'm going to talk to him anytime, anywhere. I've already accepted. Why don't you look at True Social? And he had accepted. And I asked him, do you think if his infirmity increases, will they dump him, Mr. President, at the convention, replace him with Kamala or Godman or someone else? Donald Trump says, I do. Yet you guys seem to portray Donald Trump as being angry when he gets the heave-ho. John, was Donald Trump mad when Joe Biden got the heave-ho?
Absolutely, because he had just beaten him so badly that Joe Biden had to be replaced in the ring. How many times, if you're Donald Trump, do you have to win this election? And so I think he looked at it and thought, this is ridiculous. They're going to put up another candidate. Even though he, had long believed that was a possibility, when it comes to fruition, he's angry about it. And look, there are, each of the parties has its own manner for trying to replace a candidate if a candidate withdraws. But, he looked at it and said, this isn't fair. They pulled their candidate. Their candidate was going to lose, so they grabbed somebody else. And I think that, look, as a political argument, I think it was extremely helpful to Donald Trump. I think a lot of Americans looked at what was going on the Democratic side and said, look, these people have gaslit us about Joe Biden's condition for a long time. They gaslit us about the economy and inflation. They gaslit us about Afghanistan. And now they're changing candidates. And you put all that together, and I think it was hard for a lot of people who were on the fence between Trump and Biden to look at the Democrats and say to themselves, this is the party I want to go with.
Amie Parnes, a killer line on page 281. Kamala Harris had been gaslit too. That's a devastating. Her own team didn't tell her the truth, and it's just amazing to me that you got that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what this book does, what we aim to do, is take you inside these rooms. We take you inside her room when she finds out that she's losing and that she has lost in the final hours of the campaign. We take you inside Tim Walz's room, his hotel room at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, where he is also shocked to learn that they had lost. They did not go into this thinking that they were losing or that they would lose. They thought that they were going to win, and both of them are shocked in the end. And that is something that will really surprise anyone who reads this book.
What else is going to survive? I think, Jon Allen, I'm going to turn to you about this. President Obama is a villain in this book. Not because you make him a villain, but because he doesn't want Kamala Harris to get the nomination. He intrigues, but he doesn't intrigue. He says things, but he never quite says things. He puts his people in, he takes his people out. He's kind of a Yago. I mean, he's a sinister presence in the book. And I'm reading like a fair guy. I'm trying to be fair to everyone here. There aren't any heroes. Biden's not a hero. Pelosi's not a hero. Schumer is awful. Harris was just not competent to be a candidate. But Obama is just Yago.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say if there are heroes in the book, I would give you a couple thoughts. One is Susie Wiles on the
Susie
Republican side.
Wiles, Chris LaCivita, and Donald Trump are the heroes. And Barron Trump, by the way, Barron Trump.
And Donald Trump, who does a good job of getting his father on non-traditional media to go talk to folks who have big audiences that aren't necessarily focused on politics, and talk to them about why they should be interested in Donald Trump. I would also say, for on Pelosi's side, and she does the most incredible maneuvering, as you said, Nancy the Knife. Um, Unlike the other Democrats in this, at least her North Star was what she thought was best for the party, and what she thought was which is what she thought was best for the country. She's guided by that, whereas all of these other people are guided sort of by their personal interests, especially Joe Biden. Joe Biden more than anybody, but Barack Obama as well. Chuck Schumer, who's out there, taking victory laps now as though he was the one that pushed Biden out of the race because he thinks the Democrats like that, when in fact it was Pelosi who had to take on a job that nobody else was really willing to do. But as far as Obama goes, I mean, here's a guy who never thought Joe Biden was any good, didn't want him to run in 16, didn't want him to run in 20, has lost his influence with Joe Biden because of that. Decides that he wants to have a mini primary or an open convention, so he's going to wants to skip over Kamala Harris, which would have absolutely destroyed the Democratic Party, maybe for generations. I mean, taking what we know about the Democratic Party and its values and its mores, the idea that they were going to skip over the first black woman vice president in some sort of Fantasyland miracle three-week primary is just sort of ridiculous. And yet he wants to be the person that is making things happen without anyone ever seeing him make those things happen, or without rolling up his sleeves. And honestly, that was a lot of the problem with Obama as president in terms of his legislative agenda. He always wanted things to move without him having to get his hands dirty. Nancy Pelosi ended up being the person that moved things for him a lot. But I think, out of this, what you see is Barack Obama having, a much smaller level of influence than he had before this election, and in large part because of his own actions.
It's interesting observation out in the book. I think this book is going to wipe out a class of Democrats and reduce their influence dramatically because they're also incompetent. Amy, it's a novelist trick. Don't tell people what's happening. Show them what's happening. You show us that the vice president cannot do interviews, and you show us the reaction to the Sunny Houston question where she's stunned and say, I can't, not a single thing comes into my head. You don't have to say anything. It's right there. Everyone around her says, oh my God, she can't do interviews.
Yeah, I mean, the reaction was, first of all, they had prepped her for that question. They had practiced that question. But yeah, it was a little bit concerning for people. And remember, at the time, Democrats really wanted her to go out and do more interviews. But we report for the first time in this book that the president at the time, President Biden, was essentially telling her, no daylight, kid, no daylight. And so we know that there was this signal from him that he didn't want her to kind of go off on her own and run her own campaign. He wanted her to, stand beside him. And that's not something that you really want to do as a candidate. You do want to run your own campaign, and she had essentially inherited his campaign.
Well, one thing I remembered for the first time, I think I probably knew this during the campaign, John. It may have been mentioned, but I had forgotten it. The vice president turned over the vetting of her vice presidential picks to Eric Holder. Now, Eric Holder and Barack Obama are very close. So she's in essence farming out her vice presidential pick to Barack Obama's right-hand guy. And he can't figure out that Tim Walz is a buffoon? Aren't you kind of astonished?
I mean, I think they ended up with very few choices, Hugh. I mean, at the end of the day, and we report on this in the book, Josh Shapiro is the pick that Republicans are worried about. That Trump and his team look at Shapiro and say like, well, that guy's the governor of Pennsylvania. He's pro-Israel. He's better for the Democrats' message and worse for the Trump message than these other candidates. But Josh Shapiro walks in very arrogantly and basically says, "This is what I would want to do as vice president."
By the way, I don't think it's arrogant. I don't think he wanted the job. He knew they were going to lose. That's what I think.
That's exactly where I was going to go, Hugh. There are different viewpoints on this, and I'm not sure he would ever acknowledge sabotaging himself, but certainly what he did when he went in there sabotaged him and preserved him for a future presidential run. I absolutely agree with you that he better than anybody else, the sitting governor of Pennsylvania, knows how the state is going, and I think he looked at the Trump-Harris matchup and understood that there was very little chance that Harris was going to win Pennsylvania, and that if he tacked on with her, that would harm him in the future. I can't prove that he sabotaged himself, but he certainly left himself in a much better position today than he would have been had he run with Harris and lost.
Amy, we're running low on time here, so I want to ask a couple of quick exit questions. I don't know if you can say this or not. Did President Trump, Susie Wiles, and/or Chris LaCivita sit down with you off the record or on background?
We don't talk about our interviews and who we speak to, Hugh. We've never done that. We've never done so with any of our books.
That's what I thought you would say. It is my opinion, having read the book closely, that the president talked to you, Susie Wiles definitely talked to you, and Chris LaCivita definitely talked to you, and they're the only three that matter. I want to know, Jon, about the fact. I mean, Tony West, I know who that is. Lorraine Voles, no idea. Sheila Nix, no idea. Brian Fallon, I know he's an incompetent buffoon. I've never heard of Sean Clegg before. Who are all these people that I've been doing this for 35 years? Did she get like people off the street to run her campaign?
Well, I would put it this way, Hugh. For the most part, the most powerful people in that campaign continue to be Joe Biden people, which is one of the reasons she was so shackled in terms of, or so hamstrung in terms of her ability to break from him, right? Like they've all been running this losing campaign and they think that it's such a great campaign and they keep running basically the same campaign with a new candidate. And the people around her, by and large, are the people that didn't make it onto the Biden team, right? That's who surrounds a vice president. So, I'm not going to take shots at any of them personally.
Jon, question for you. Do you have any knowledge of who put the president on TV opposite Kamala Harris on the mall, stepping on her story and in essence killing her last chance of coming back?
I don't know who specifically did it, but you absolutely nailed it on the nailed it on the head. She's out there giving her big last speech from the foot of the White House basically, and he's there calling Trump's supporters garbage. I mean, Hillary Clinton had the presence of mind to at least make it a fraction of Trump supporters she was going after in that horrible debacle of a speech where she talked about the basket of deplorables. Half of them are in a basket of deplorables. Biden just goes out there and says all of Trump's supporters are garbage. It's unfathomable, and at the very best, it is a deeply bad political comment, and at worst, it reflects something that Joe Biden thinks about half the country.
Penultimate question, Amie Parnes. Who set up the shot for the Dana Bash interview with Tim Walz and the vice president? Because the shot was awful. I'm not a set designer, but I've been doing television for 35 years. And the moment I saw it, I said, who in the world thought up this shot? Who did that?
We know what happened after. She had chair requirements, as we report.
Yeah, you report that.
And that was something that was real. We have the exact measurements of what they needed to do to produce other chairs and interviews. They knew, obviously, that didn't look good. And that's something that the president does really well. He's really good at the visual. Everything is about visuals for him. I think the Harris campaign knew that they had kind of messed up that visual.
All right, last question for both of you. I'll start with you, Amy. I am personally aghast at what the book reveals. We were without a president for at least 9 months, most likely 2.5 years, could have been longer. Are you aghast that we didn't know this?
I think, the media comes off as really not great in recent reporting of these books, and people love to blame the media that we didn't report this. I think we all knew. I know I certainly have reported things about Biden, and Jon has as well. So it's not like no one knew about this. But what we do in this book is we show you just how bad it was.
Now, Jon, my personal theory, I only know Ron Klain a little bit. I think he quit because he knew how bad it was. I don't think, and I know he went out and did debate prep, and the debate prep didn't happen. It was a nightmare, very well explained. Do you think he was aghast? Are you aghast at the fact the man was not competent to be president?
I'm aghast, and the way that I always look at it is this moment where they decide, where he decides he's going to step aside as the candidate for president, but somehow considers himself competent to run the country. I mean, this is just it's such utter hooey, the idea that he's, incompetent to run a campaign, but competent to run the country. I am aghast at some of the things that we found. As Amy said, all of us I shouldn't say all of us reporters. The two of us as reporters, I know for sure, spent a lot of time trying to figure out what exactly was going on at the White House. It was very difficult to do. I know both of us reported things over the course of the last few years that pointed to diminished
Well,
faculties.
I'm here with a prediction. If either of you end up in the Potomac, I'm looking for Jen O'Malley Dillon. That's who I think is going to have her fingerprints on the knife because she cannot be happy with either of you. Have you heard from her yet?
Well, we don't talk about our sources.
Yeah.
All right. I just say thank you for a great book. Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House will be #1 on the New York Times list. You got there first. You got it done. You must have worked 24/7, 360. Well, not 365. It's 4 months ago. Well done. My hat is off to you, and thank you both for joining me. Have a good book tour.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Hugh.